following discussion is not necessarily the views of all involved. The goal is to start open and honest discussion in the Christian worldview. Like all things, weigh what you hear with what you know and join us in our pursuit for the truth. Enjoy the podcast.
Can you imagine losing your job and getting replaced by a guy named Michael? Is this someone to be like, why are snakes evil? So well, freaking bit me. Well, think about it, they're not good. It's the nope on a rope, dude.
We're into George of the Jungle right out of this question.
Is that George of the Jungle?
I don't know what it is. Just my opinion on snakes.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Second Rate Saints podcast. I'm one of your hosts here, Caleb. To my left is
Joshua. And to my left is
Joel. And to my left,
I'm Colton. And to my left,
it's me, Caleb. We've gone full circle. We have the whole crew here, minus Stuart. It's very sad, but we're going to continue on the show. Joel, what do we do on the internet?
If you want to check out what we're doing online, you can check out secondratesaints.com for our weekly episodes, as well as blog posts, book reviews, and a couple of new things that are coming down the pipeline now in a little bit. If you'd like to support the podcast financially, we do have a Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/secondratesaints, or you can find the link on our website that I mentioned before. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can comment on our YouTube, email us at secondratesaints@gmail.com, or use the chat feature on our website. Yeah. We're also on Twitter and Instagram, but for X and Instagram.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Josh, you've got the reins of the topic today. Mm-hmm. You want to introduce us?
So we have had a successful episode titled The Satan, which is odd because we're a podcast devoted to talking about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so far, our most successful episode is The Enemy, which is interesting to say the least. But it was a solo episode, and I didn't want to leave it a solo episode. I was hoping that we can get the boys in on the conversation. And so we're kind of just going over what was said in the episode, but trying to get your guys' perspective on it. I would love to see your guys' perspectives, the disagreements and stuff like that, because that was just for the audience's sake. I say it in the episode, but that was my perspective. Mm-hmm. In our joint studies, we had to do a capstone project, which was a biblical theology, and I did mine on the Satan. And a larger concept on God's enemies and how they oppose him. And so what I covered in the episode was the cultural view of Satan versus the biblical view of Satan, how he appears, his behavior, his purpose, his nature. I also talked about how odd it is that Satan is often in God's presence when he's mentioned. And the tension of God using his enemies, because the Satan is often present or sent out to do things at the command of God, or within God's control of saying, leave, be gone, all this. And you see that in passages like with the story of Job, where he's commanded to go do things to Job. And then you see with Jesus and his temptation, you see, and the Holy Spirit led Jesus into the desert to be tempted by the devil. And I also showed like the through lines of this character who has many names and many behaviors through the whole Bible to show like how that works. And there's going to be another episode later on coming out eventually on the why is he doing it? How is it that he opposes God and his people? And then also a lot of it is on possession. And then there's going to be other meditation episodes on like the angel of the Lord, Melchizedek, other things. But I would suggest if you're interested in what I just said, go to the episode and watch it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about it, but it kind of requires you to listen to it a little.
It's a bit of a different listen for what we've done before. So if you've been following us for a while, check it out and tell us what you think, because Josh, I was really impressed. Like I hadn't heard it before it was put out.
Yeah.
And I was just, I was kind of blown away by it, to be honest with you. It was very, very rational and sequential. Like you were just kind of allowing the argument to kind of speak for itself, right? Rather than, like a lot of times we'll throw something on the table and everyone takes a hit at it.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. But I really think that you put some good time into the conversation.
Yeah, your
Thank
study showed forth.
Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah.
Good job, Josh.
I mean, eventually when we get your meditation episode on cosmology, we'll...
Yeah, I don't know.
No, you just doomed him to actually have to do that episode. Awesome.
Meditations is your series. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but it doesn't stop other people from doing one every once in a while.
We'll see. Anyway, back to Satan.
It's just so uncomfortable. So in the episode, I talked a lot about how does culture perceive Satan? We have in movies and in books and in plays and in everything. Music a lot recently has been portraying Satan for a long time. He's just in many people's minds, Christian or not, he is the villain of villains. He's the thing.
ultimate evil.
The ultimate evil.
Yeah.
And that is true. But how is it that you guys see Satan in culture?
Well, I mean, you quoted it when you did the episode, but there was that whole like Satan's greatest trick was convincing everybody he didn't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's almost a thought that Satan is kind of only in the subconscious now, right?
Mm-hmm.
That he doesn't exist as an actual entity of any kind, and that he has no actualization, right? And I kind of thought of this when they were talking about the disillusionment in the West with God. And I think it kind of works both with God and with Satan. And it is that he sinks into the unconscious, that it was something people used to have at the forefront of their mind all the time. It's like, hey, this battle's not against flesh and blood, but principalities and power, is against Satan fundamentally. And we just don't have that mindset anymore. We're, if anything, and this is also backed by scripture, but we think of ourselves as battling the flesh. We don't really think of ourselves as battling any kind of spiritual force, right?
Yeah, with the materialization of the world, we've materialized God's enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. So
yeah, like
maybe it's the lack of representation of Satan in culture that is notable, right? That people don't necessarily take take true evil seriously, as if everything has a dash of good that can be redeemed, and Satan is not that.
At some point, Joel, what you said there, I'd like to get back to, but I think your comments about how there's a lack, or I don't know if it's a lack. There's an odd misrepresentation of Satan in culture, right? You have shows like, I don't know, Lucifer or what else?
Good Omens just came out.
Good Omens.
He's just a club owner with daddy issues.
Supernatural or whatever. I don't know if Satan's in that specifically.
No idea.
Be a weird character to skip, but yeah.
Yeah. And then there's that kids show, that animated show that's coming out.
Yes.
Yeah. What's it?
What?
Something Hotel.
Yeah. It's Satan and Lilith's daughter are hanging out in hell and trying to bring people freedom from the oppressive angels.
Yeah. So
And redeem them. Yeah.
There's something.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So there's representation of Satan in media, but that representation of Satan isn't like what we traditionally and have always understood Satan to be. Like in that Lord of the Rings Melkor type, father of evil type, and like chaos entity that seeks to bring soul in disorder and corrupt things. Instead, he's become, I think, at least in a lot of modern depictions of Satan, he's become like, well, that's the person that actually, takes his own, he doesn't, he takes his own future into his own hands and, self-actualizes his own dreams and stuff. And he becomes this agent of self-actualization. Because actually, I kind of think the direction that most Satanists go with it. But anyway.
Yes.
And they almost tell it like it's like he's bringing fire to humanity almost. Like
Yeah.
he's bringing the option to choose, and it's like it's not what's happening there.
So I think
as a sort of liberator.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the champion of all contrarians, which is funny because that makes everybody that likes him a follower. But that's
Yeah.
The growing symbol of Satan as a freedom from oppression. We're talking about, but also of it, like often like intellect and rationalism as well.
enlightenment.
Enlightenment. Well, some point to even the Enlightenment, but I don't go.
But
that far.
as a source of bringing,
like the bringing humans fire, like Prometheus.
Yes.
Prometheus. Yeah. Which I am not a fan of in culture.
but I think those are the kind of common themes that you end up seeing a lot
Yeah.
in modern renditions of, and I mean like very modern renditions of
current.
Satan. You don't see that in Paradise Lost. You see a different misrepresentation.
Well, you see, in almost like by attributing Satan as purely evil and like all that, you're kind of taking away his agency. I think there's a little bit of that kind of idea that he's not an agent himself, but
he just becomes evil with eyes.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah. Which is also a misrepresentation.
Do you think that is dualism in some sense? That because God is ultimately good and entirely good, that we think any opposition to him must be entirely evil? Do you think that's something that's mistakenly put on the text, or that is?
Oh, what's the heresy where God doesn't have persons? Not really. It's like Sabellianism,
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I don't know what it's
where
called.
it's like God manifests as persons depending on context. It's like it's kind of
Yeah, it's like
modalism, but it's
Jesus
not.
or Satan or not Satan. Sorry, it's God or Jesus.
Well,
or,
it's they're all
The angel
they
of the
are
Lord.
they appear as persons to us based on our context and the way we are created,
Right.
but ultimately God is more like an energy or a force.
Yeah.
I think it's very common for people getting to Joel, your critique there with, it's just evil with eyes. Sometimes it's easy for people in either direction, towards God or towards Satan, to really say, well, we just perceive them as persons, but it's actually a supernatural force or a law.
Well, and that's the I think the big critique of those that are not Christians. Sorry, the big failing of those that are not Christians is that they see Satan as an opposite to God, but he's not. He's as weak compared to God as we are. He's a created being. He's
right. He is there. Like you said, there's no dualism. It's not good. God is the good one and Satan's the bad one. They're eternally locked in conflict. That's not the point.
Yeah.
As you go in the episode, the meditations episode, one is very subservient to the other. The chained Leviathan,
yes,
which is Satan, the chained Leviathan,
which is I think it's such a hopeful. It's terrifying image, but it's also a hopeful image. That's the image that God gives to Job. Is like the thing that nothing else can oppose. Yeah, I made him on a whim. Like this isn't the story you've been told by other religions. This is not a dualism. He's powerless to me.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Let's
talk about the Leviathan thing.
Absolutely.
So,
and this gets into the forms of like how he's presented in the Bible.
Yeah, for sure. That there is something of a, I don't want to call it a symbology. I don't know what it is. What would you call it? The reoccurring, like he is. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about that actually.
No, it's good.
Leviathan. I took that verse in Job to be more of a reference to outside text, whereas you took it more to be a reference to inside text.
Yeah.
What's the inspiration? Because I think that it's who has tamed Leviathan is kind of more alluding to the creation of the world and to the chaos, like of the waters, essentially being represented as Leviathan or as a dragon.
Yeah.
Right. So in my mind, it's the chaos that he forms the world out of that is Leviathan, not necessarily Satan.
Yeah.
Job.
No. And I think
like as described in Job.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's.
Which is not like I didn't just come out with that 5 minutes ago. Like that is a perspective of some scholars. Yeah.
Well, and I think to the author being the oldest book.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Oldest book in the timeline, not oldest book written necessarily.
Yeah.
being one of the older books in the Bible, I would definitely say that is the more logical way to go. But from the rest of the text, from the entirety of the Bible, when you have that line near the end of the episode in Revelation where it's that great red dragon, the Satan, the devil, the serpent, the one that led the world astray. And John just connects all the dots between all the characters. The dragon being that final chief apocalyptic image of him as being the same as a Leviathan. From the waters, breathes fire, scales, all those things.
I thought it was pretty explicit. Like he calls Satan the Leviathan in Revelation.
In Revelation, yes.
Yes.
But in Job, what I'm saying is that because we have Revelation, we can look back.
Right.
Because of the rest of the Bible, we can look back on the book of Job and go, he's saying this thing.
Yeah.
This monster of all monsters that other religions like the Babylonian religion and the Canaanites who treat it as an equal to the gods, God is saying, it's nothing.
Yep.
Also, if
he does that a lot.
if the Leviathan is a thing that he created as presented, like depending on how you want to argue that with Job, it actually kind of goes against where you can see in the Old Testament where the created cosmic waters, the soupy stuff.
Yeah.
The proto-creation cosmic soup waters existed before and have eternally existed. Because if Leviathan is the personification of that or the continuation on that in the ordered reality, if God says that, I made him too, then it actually kind of goes against that theory and more towards everything, including the chaotic, spacey soup waters.
Yeah. The only problem I see with that kind of connection, not that it's a problem, like it's not bad. It's just a lot of authors or a lot of commentators also draw the connection between the beginning of the book and the end of the book. How Satan talking with God is look, see, I have tamed even the Satan, the one who accuses you, by depicting me as a Leviathan. And people point to like Revelation is like, see, they're the same thing. And so, but even from Job itself, a lot of people point to the Satan that accuses them in the beginning of the book, that accuses Job that he's proud. He of course he would be he'd be praising you. Well, he's not suffering himself, that kind of thing. That now that he is, when God shows the Leviathan tamed, that is the same accuser.
I mean, New Studies in Biblical Theology has a specific book proving that point. I have yet to read it, it's sitting on my shelf.
Yeah,
piercing the Leviathan.
Proving which point?
The Satan image in Job.
Yep.
Okay.
It's one of the big points.
Yeah,
of that
I have
book.
the other one they do on Job.
Yeah.
Which is not Now My Eyes Have Seen You. It's a different one.
Yeah.
No, it might be Now My Eyes Have Seen You.
It's Now My Eyes Have Seen You, subtitle like Creation in Job or something like that.
Okay, well, then on that idea, what is Behemoth? Or Behemoth?
Behemoth? Well, what's interesting is you've got a beast of the land and a beast of the sea.
Okay.
Which is, in my mind, super interesting because is that then the inspiration for the beast of the land and the beast of the sea?
Yes.
Which is connected to the great dragon, the Satan in Revelation, which is, again, connecting more and more stuff. So it's a continuation of that idea of God saying, I have created these great things that you are terrified of. Because that's his whole speech is where were you when I made all of this stuff?
Yeah.
Showing the wisdom of God creating everything that is intertwined and interconnected and beyond our ability to manage. And him saying, you just got to trust me a little. Like it sucks, but if all of this is under my grip, then so is this moment.
Yeah. I think it was more, so is your suffering.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's that if all of this is under my control, if I've ordered all of these things to be perfect, then so is this moment, so is your suffering, so is the deaths.
So I still see there being a creative motif there, where it's still out of chaos. I have made this, right? So I don't know. It's still the conquering of the deep seems like just as
for sure
likely of an explanation to me.
But that's the beauty of the image is that Satan as the Leviathan, as the champion or the personification of the chaos.
Yeah.
He's saying that it's not just chaos that I've conquered.
Yeah.
It's not just the Leviathan. It's your enemies. It's these things are connected. They're images within images.
Yeah. At least for the beast of the land that comes from Revelation. I know a lot of people tie there's so many different interpretations people have made, but the two that I find compelling are either that it is Rome, whereas the Leviathan controls the beast, like it's greater than the beast of the land kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's this idea of progression that Rome is from Satan and the Leviathan and all that, or that it's an antichrist and Satan kind of mimicking and reversing the whole Jesus as Jesus comes as the Christ, the God to earth, whereas the beast of the land is the Leviathan brought to earth as well.
Those are very interesting.
Either one doesn't,
And those
much,
aren't
but
necessarily mutually exclusive.
no, they're not, especially in Revelation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's that's the beautiful part about Job to me is it's just this, it's God in 2 pages with just expounding on this tiny little man who's just had everything taken from him and just unloading on him the wisdom from on high.
Yeah.
And just saying, hey, it's going to be okay.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say it's interesting because oftentimes people will go, yeah, I know God has a plan for like the big stuff in life, but the little things, like, I mean, that's neither here nor there. They're like, there's not, he's not determining the little stuff.
Well, that kind of gets into what I was trying to say is that a lot of people will point to God chaining Leviathan, the great terror, the great chaos, whatever the either creation and its chaos or like the pre-creation and its chaos or the Satan itself, and point to God controlling and say, why created in the first place? Like, why is it there? Why does it need to exist?
And according to the Psalms, God made the sea so that the Leviathan could swim around.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Yeah.
It's hard to take theology from the Psalms sometimes.
Yeah. But again, that Leviathan image, it's not because of the Psalms and because of the books of Isaiah and other things. The Leviathan image doesn't just stay in Job.
Nope.
Yeah. He created the ocean so that the Leviathan may go around in it. You've also got his promise to pick up. God said that he will take up his great sword and protect the garden from the thorns and the thistles and pierce the Leviathan. And that's just a great image. Because again, it continues that theme of there's this thing that God has created, but it's also opposing him.
Right.
It's under his control. Right. And then you see with Jesus, we've brought this up, I think, in a couple episodes, where in the story of Jonah, it says a big fish swallows Jonah. But when Jesus quotes the story, he says the Leviathan.
He says sea monster.
Yes.
Yeah. Which you tie in your episode pretty well as being a big sea monster.
Yes.
But, wait. So now are we saying that Satan?
I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't say that, but it's...
Some people do.
I would say it's more that it's more of a stand-in to communicate that he had some sort of either akin or actual supernatural encounter in either by death or by transportation of some description, where God preserves his life even in the places where there's
opposite of God.
It's the undone. Yeah. It's
the sea in ancient times is often, almost always, at least in their cultures, portrayed as the unending chaos, the
untamable.
Horrible, the mess.
Yeah. And so I think
nothingness.
I think it has, and then a demon fish. That's the noise they make, by the way. I read that in a Jonah commentary. No,
the demon fish.
Demon fish. No, it's a how even an agent of that chaos, in which is so antithetical to humans and to the ordered good, God can just preserve life because he preserve life on someone who doesn't deserve it.
Yes.
Just because he's like, no, I have a purpose and a plan for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because he's Lord of all,
Mm-hmm.
which is,
But
yeah.
not to, again, bring it up, but why create him in the first place? That's something you talk about in your episode, is that the Leviathan is chained by God, he's under God, but you never really get into why create the Leviathan in the first place.
And I'm going to be honest.
Mhm.
I don't know the answer, but if the Leviathan is in fact the Satan, as I believe John is saying by conjuring up him as the red dragon.
Also, can I ask you a question there, Josh?
Your question's about to lead into my answer, but yes, continue.
Probably not, though. It's a dumb question. You don't actually believe that there's a Leviathan in the ocean, do you?
No.
Have you ever heard of the Loch Ness Monster?
He's in a lake in Scotland.
Yeah, he got trapped.
And that's how Jesus defeated Satan.
The British built a dam.
Of course, it was the British.
Threw him into the lake of fire in Scotland.
The modern day equivalent of the place of chaos.
Oh, man.
Maybe not. I
No,
love
you-
Scotland. I'm just kidding.
The Loch Ness.
No one's going
Right,
to get that
Loch-
joke.
Well, no one needs to. It's fine.
So you brought up a question before the podcast. You wanted to ask me. Do you want
Sure.
to ask it again?
Sure. Everything that God creates,
Yeah.
right? We see this in our world today. We see that within ourselves. We see that within the Bible. Whatever God creates, you can say like there are parts of his intent and his desire put within it. There is a way that, yes, well, they are marred, such as ourselves, that there is still good in them,
Yes.
right? Would you say then, is there still good within Satan and the demons?
The answer I gave you earlier was only that he exists, which is the same answer Aquinas.
Yes, I was very
Yes.
impressed. It was kind of a trap because I was like, I have Aquinas' answer and I'm going to ask you. And then you performed very well.
Thank you.
Can we break that down a little
What
bit?
does that mean?
So,
The me testing, Josh, or
Yeah.
the answer?
Either.
well, no, and this gets into, we skipped over the chief, the fall, the point that Satan first appears in the biblical narrative.
Can I give the Aquinas thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
In 4 sentences.
In
or
4
less.
sentences or less. Aquinas makes the argument that God himself, being existence himself, all things that exist are dependent upon his self-existence.
Mhm.
Well, through his creation and preservation, the world has not gone awry as far as to the point where there is nothing good left in it. However, its mere existence as dependent upon God is a good. And so his argument of like how much quote unquote good is left in the fallen angels and in Satan is, well, it's just merely their existence. That is all you can say.
Mhm. And like
Right.
the Leviathan, however God uses him.
And I think
And their
Josh is
purpose.
going to go into Satan's curse now
Yes.
to explain, to try to tie that.
Yes. So Serpent in the beginning, it says that God made him. He was the craftiest of the creatures. It's the thought that people go, culturally, we have this image that, or theologically, some people present that Satan fell before this and the demons and their thing happened before this. And then he snuck into the garden.
Yeah, that's the main view. Yeah.
That's the main view.
Yeah, I got into this with my priest like just 2 weeks ago.
Well, and I don't necessarily disagree. I just bring up the conversation because we're going through in the episode and I talk about how, well, why would he be allowed in the garden? All those things, all those questions. But the ultimate thing I get to is he is cursed because he sins and he's cursed to oppose Adam and Eve and her descendants and Adam. And in 2 ways, he's cursed in that way. So first, God says, I will put enmity between you and the woman. And then also he's cursed to eat dust all the days of his life. And then Adam is made dust. when he dies.
Mhm.
And so there's a double connection there.
Do you think his purpose as a created thing changed in that curse?
I think as much as Adam and Eve's did. And what I mean by that is,
I don't know if okay.
What I mean there is that Adam and Eve were cursed, but they're cursed to do the thing they were already commanded to do, but now with pain and turmoil and strife.
Mhm.
So, Adam was commanded to work the garden, but now he's commanded to work, and he's cursed with toil and suffering and strife in doing so. And then Eve now her childbirth is painful, and
Just
her
child rearing
is painful, and communication with her husband, helping her husband, is difficult and fraught with awful miscommunication and pain.
Mhm.
I think if that pattern is the same between them, you can make the inference with Satan that because now he has enmity in opposing God's people, and all those things, that him as the accuser, that not in the evil sense of trying to trip people up, but as the one that tests, the one that points out sin, you could argue that that was his purpose. Because we have in our brains a thing called opponent processing, or how the best way to figure out a result is to have somebody bring up the other side, right? The opposite answer, and debate with you over the thing.
Right.
And that in a grand scale, it would not be terrible if God had a good being like an inspector inspect creation.
Right. I've seen people draw the parallel of like the prosecutor against you kind of thing.
Yeah. But now
evil.
but now he's cursed to do so with enmity. He's now cursed to do so with hate and to eat them, to destroy them. Yeah. In the same way that Adam worked the garden, but now he works it with pain.
So you're saying he got bored and made Adam and Eve sin so he could do his job. I'm sorry.
Well, the only
Yeah.
problem with if we just leave it there is that Satan's job to be like being created to accuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, now he's doing it with enmity and all that. Is that before him accusing them and getting them to do it is not wrong. Because that's what his purpose was. The problem there comes from the lie.
Yes.
See,
But why would he lie if that's his purpose?
That's fair, but also why do Eve and Adam fail to do what they're doing before they sin, before they eat the apple?
But I'm sure both of us can agree that heavenly beings, as presented in the Bible, are very different from the potential beings that are humans, right? Even in Genesis.
yes, I don't know if we're told how and why Satan falls. That's where I'd go. Additionally, I also wonder whether or not Satan, in being cursed by God in Genesis 3, his function and role shift.
It's very possible. It could be that, like the cherubim in Ezekiel.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I? Here, I'm just going to continue because out of everything else that's in that situation, creation itself, the trees, the tree of life, Adam and Eve, humans, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that's going to sustain the creation project moving forward after the fall,
Yeah.
everything else is going to survive except for Satan. At that point, Satan has said, and you will be opposed. You are going to be opposed against everything, essentially, and get left behind.
Yes.
You're going to get thrown into the waste pile after this project.
And those who follow you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm which I think kind of runs alongside the how much good is in.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it's almost as though I think that there's a declarative change in the person and ontology of Satan in that curse.
Well, and
I'm toying with that idea.
No, I don't disagree.
Well, and to continue this conversation, Ezekiel 28 is poignant for this, is because there is a prophecy given by Ezekiel to the king of Tyre, And he is described as an anointed guardian cherub and being in the Garden of Eden and then being cast out. And it describes him as having gold settings. It gives him a angelic presentation, like when you see other angels do.
Even a priestly one.
Yes.
Right.
Because he has on his chest the insets for what looks like an ephod with
Like
gems.
the high priest.
Like a high priest. And if he is a guardian cherub, the cherubs protect, like the ones in the temple, the holy place.
It's also worth pointing out that the sin of the king of Tyre, the thing that typologically is getting overlaid onto Satan is pride.
Yes.
And that's where we get the Satan's fall is due to pride. It's heavily influenced by that Ezekiel passage.
There's also the Isaiah stuff and then Revelation 12 as well that talk about the war in heaven and whether or not that's because you seem to, which I didn't actually know, you seem to say that the war in heaven isn't a thing that happened, quote unquote, before creation.
Well, no, and
I think what most people believe. I'm
most
not
people
saying it's
do,
right.
and I think that it's very possible.
Right.
My only thing is that with the opening of Genesis, the author doesn't know that, and the characters don't know that. So, is that what's being presented by the author of Genesis?
Sure.
Is that how we are supposed to see the serpent in this instance?
Right.
Because he's not described in that moment as being evil. He's just described as being crafty.
Yep.
And with this passage, it is then at this point in which he's in the garden, Ezekiel 28, in which he is cast out.
Right.
So have you come across the interpretation, I think it's Michael Heiser that puts it forth, that this passage is about Adam because he fits the priestly role better, and that the cherub thing is... Yeah.
That's fair, except this being walks among the stones of fire is made of gold and is described as an anointed guardian cherub.
Yeah, which he puts, like, you can say that, but Heiser does put forth the case that those things are about kingship and they're about,
he's the only one that makes those connections.
I don't know if he's the only one.
The cherub one? At least for me, he's the only one that I've ever seen make a cherub connection to Adam.
Well, fair
Kingship.
enough.
I disagree as well. I agree with Caleb, but
it's a lesser, accepted interpretation, because when you say Lucifer, you think of, Satan. And if this passage is talking about, Adam, it kind of confuses the pot a little bit.
Yeah. What's interesting is the fact that he's called a guardian cherub, if it is in fact talking about Satan, it's his role as a guardian, the protector of that area, the same way as the cherubim in the temple. They are the guardians of God's domain.
Right.
And so if there is pride within this specific cherubim that then protects the garden from these humans that he doesn't like, then it becomes, now he's not just guardian, now he's the accuser. He's the one that seeks out the threat in everyone else. Because what you see in these passages, like with Job and later on with Zechariah, is he's pointing out people's sin. They can't come near you. They're sinful. This person's bad. They can't be here.
Right. Now, this is a thought in real time, so I could be just pulling this out of nothing. But the fact that, do you think the Bible presents the idea, or that it's fair to draw the idea out of the Bible that Satan made humans fall, at least later on in how we interpret, like if the fall of man happened after a war in heaven, I'm just like timeline stuff in reality. I don't know. If that happened, does Satan tempt humanity because he's jealous of them, because they were given the role that he wanted, or at least more authority than him? If he is that quote unquote guardian cherub in Eden.
I mean, again, this is all speculation.
Yep.
The only thing we're given is that he's
real time.
Prideful. It's because of his pride, he corrupts his beauty and his wisdom, which was perfect.
Right.
And that he is present in the garden as a guardian cherub.
So then you have to go with he sneaks in because he can't be the guardian and also be after the war in heaven, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's Paradise Lost.
Unless the war in heaven and the tempting of Adam and Eve
is the same thing.
Are linked somehow.
Yeah.
Right.
That because he's not mentioned. This is another point I made. He's not mentioned as being kicked out of the garden. That's in the Garden of Eden narrative.
Yep.
And so it could be that he is then, after Adam and Eve are kicked out, that's when Michael deals with him.
Right.
With the war in heaven is the war in Eden. That's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Do you think it's fair to say that if we take that idea of the narrative where Satan is the guardian cherub, that then the flaming sword that protects Eden after they leave would be a replacement for that in the narrative itself?
That is at least some protection from something getting in.
For sure.
Yeah,
But it would still be protecting the garden.
But it'd be poignant because of the temple. Is he's not the only one. There's multiple.
Sure.
So
Right. My argument is that I don't think that the story cares about Satan anymore in the Eden perspective. It doesn't. It gives him his curse and then it moves on. It doesn't talk. The idea that the fact that it doesn't talk about him again doesn't mean that he's still in there, but rather it just doesn't care.
Oh
The
yeah,
narrative doesn't
absolutely,
care.
absolutely.
That could be. I do think that the text isn't concerned about him. Like that's legitimate. However, Satan does just, when God calls the sons of God, the angels, Satan shows up. So he's allowed in the holy places.
Yeah. I agree with that.
So and the
Job's a
Garden
good
of Eden
example
would
of
count. I think the
Job,
Garden of Eden would count.
Zechariah.
Yep.
He's standing at the right side or the right hand of the angel of the Lord, which is that causes some tension. And he's also with Jesus in the wilderness, and the entirety of the Book of Revelation. So, there's some tension there.
I do think that overall, there's several themes, and both are like good.
Yeah.
And some are just like, we don't need to know about Satan. We don't need to know about Satan. But I think there's certain themes and concepts that are in the Bible, and facts, even if we're going to talk about Satan, which we are, that are in the Bible that the Bible doesn't directly divulge, mainly because it's like, either it's not important, or my suspicion, God's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you too much about that because you'll make that into something that you shouldn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what was so interesting about doing this paper and then this episode was how little there is. Well, and I think that's what leads Michael Heiser to get to his other conclusion, is that there's multiple of them.
Yeah.
That there's multiple Satans.
Yeah, because it gets to the heavenly council idea. And then in the heavenly council, what do you have? Well, you have, seats on the board, essentially.
Yeah.
And that this title can be occupied by different individuals, which means that the Satan that was cast out is not necessarily the Satan that is in the courtroom in Job, but rather somebody who's holding that position.
Yeah.
Specifically Elohim, or a classification of either deity or cherubim or whatever.
Yeah.
Essentially angels. What we would
Definitely angels, but a classification of Elohim, which would put them a little higher than the angels.
Divine being.
Yeah. The only problem is that you say that, then it just leads to gods, and then people get confused.
Yeah.
That is the word, is gods, right? His whole thing is off of Psalm 81.
Well, no, and it's so for the
Also, isn't Michael
blanket
Heiser's thing angels? It's like, no, that's a role. That's not a classification of being in his system.
For sure, because messenger is not a being. It is the messenger.
In his
I think it's fair to say colloquially that angel encapsulates the heavenly
angel
beings.
has become.
But I understand what you mean.
If that's not the word used in the Bible for them, then it gets confusing.
True.
Right.
And so, let's just give a quick overview of what he presents. So he presents the idea of the Hebraic biblical term Elohim is not a name for God. It is a type of being, and that type of being is divine. They're a spirit being, not of earth, of the heavens. And so an Elohim or an El is one of those things. It can be a angel, a cherubim, seraphim, divine council, a god specifically. In English, we've translated Elohim or El as God, and we associate God specifically with either the Zeus idea or God himself. And so we have colloquially turned Elohim as an isolated term for God himself, whereas they meant spirit being.
Yeah.
And so then now, because we have God, we need another name for these other things that exist within the spiritual world. So we call them angels and bad ones, demons, which is, those are terms as well.
Sure.
But in the biblical,
And you
I
see
don't
that
think
thought,
it's that
you see that thought
simple,
in the
but
New
yeah.
Testament, like
Yeah.
really hammered in. In the Old Testament, you do kind of see a development of what
Yeah.
Michael Heiser's pointing out. The question would be whether or not is that the context in which God is presenting, his, like, is that
Is that
a
a real statement, or is he just using the words that the culture had?
yeah, well, also the system that the culture had,
Yeah.
right? And that would be the question that you'd have that debate
Yeah.
on that.
yeah, because you see a shift from the Old Testament term to the New Testament term, daemon, which ended up becoming a in the Greek understanding of what a daemon was a spiritual entity in the way that you would describe a spirit in a room with a crowd, that it possesses the crowd and changes how they behave. But in the biblical sense, it possesses an individual and changes how they behave.
Or think of the name Lucifer for Satan.
Yeah.
It means light bearer, and it's used, I think, by Isaiah or Ezekiel.
Yes.
It's in the Ezekiel passage, isn't it?
Ezekiel.
No, it's in the Isaiah passage. So
Oh,
Isaiah
I get
has
that confused all the time.
Yeah. The Isaiah passage describes a being called the light bringer that falls.
The morning star,
Yeah.
which might be Jesus in the New Testament, the morning star, but not the same description. It's not meant to be the same.
Yeah. A morning star in the religious sense was a title for a individual of extreme import. So like a pharaoh.
Normally kingly related.
Yeah. So like
Right.
if you've watched The Prince of Egypt, Ramses calls himself the morning star of
Yep.
Egypt. So
Yeah. That one he also connects to possibly Adam. He has
Yeah.
a pretty big thing that falls in any kind of fall that's mentioned is usually Adam.
mhm.
I don't know if I buy that part as much.
Yeah. It's
I don't know.
I mean, I hope I presented it well, but the passage, the Ezekiel passage it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's same. And I think the Isaiah passage is even more difficult. Though the Catholics tend to go strong with the Isaiah passage.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, they build that into a whole theology of like he was the angel of light and
Yeah.
all these kind of
Yeah.
things, and
Yeah.
A lot of
therefore
people
the
still
angel
hold
of
that.
illusion and things.
Yeah.
And like if you listen to like exorcists and things like that, they still hold to a lot of those ideas.
Part of that is they also can pull a lot more from the deuterocanonical books.
Yeah.
Right.
Like first
And that-
century writings.
Yeah, and that helps them to articulate a more fleshed out demonology. Whether that's accurate is a different discussion. But they actually have more material to build a demonology than the
It's true.
Protestant Bible.
Most of our demonology stems from either Jesus casting out demons or Satan himself.
Yeah, it's far more limited. That being said, though,
Or Nephilim.
I don't know if they're necessarily wrong in where they go on all of those things. The amount of confidence that they say things with, that's my problem, and how systematized it has become.
When they mention
That's my
Raphael as a archangel, I'm like, okay, well, first
You
of
mean
all,
the Ninja Turtle?
Yep.
Yeah, that's
The Bible doesn't talk about
that sort of
archangels
stuff. I'm
properly,
like,
and it doesn't talk about Raphael ever.
yeah.
So
Except in Enoch.
but Enoch's not in the Bible.
Yes, but it
yeah,
mentions,
but it's like, what does that
it
mean?
mentions the 12 angels, and then those 12
Yes.
angels are referenced in Revelation, which means it talks about them. It doesn't
In
name
Revelation?
them. Yeah.
Where?
Read it somewhere. I'll be honest with you. I don't remember the verse number, so I'm doing a bad job of proving my point.
Also,
I
also,
think
I
know what
don't
you're
know.
talking about.
Like, are
It's the 12 lights and all that,
is
right?
all
Yes, the 12 lights. That's
Yeah.
what it is. Yeah.
Oh,
And
yes.
so that's like seen as the
Sorry, Caleb.
apocalyptic reference
Yep.
to the 12 angels in Enoch, which again means there's an allusion to them, but
when
there's
you
not
get-
an actual naming of them.
when you get books like Jude or Jesus talking about Enoch, it doesn't help either.
Yeah,
But-
right? Like it's
okay. Here's
there's
my question:
validity, but not in the same way.
does the Bible? This is beyond the point, so
Yeah,
forgive
we've
me.
gone in a
We'll
rabbit
move off of this question right away. Does the Bible contain all things that are spiritually true, or just those things which God desires to communicate for our salvation and guidance? Can spiritual truth exist outside of the Bible, but there's no way to know whether or not it's not divinely authoritative in your life?
It depends what you mean. Like, I would go with all spiritual realities are found in the Bible.
Okay.
Or at least can be found out with the Bible.
Sure.
So like the Trinity was not a thing put forward that you need to believe in the Bible, but all mainline and, in my opinion, real Christians have to believe in the Trinity to be Christian.
I agree. But are there like, I think everyone here would agree that there are certain things that we don't know that exist in the heavenly realities.
Yes.
That is not communicated in the Bible.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Sure. Can there be things that are, let's say, seen or written of in other books that are not in the biblical text because they're not divinely inspired, but they could potentially be right? This is the wildest argument I've ever made for the deuterocanonical books.
I'm going to argue no.
Okay. I'm not saying they're God's word.
Because, I know what you mean.
Okay.
Is that there's something not talked about the Bible that's talked about in a different book that is true.
I'm not even saying that I
don't
believe
think
this
so.
argument. I just want to clarify. Anyway, sorry.
At least about spiritual realities? No. Physical realities?
Why?
Sure.
Why?
Because I think that the only way that we have learned about spiritual realities is through God himself. And the only way we know through God himself is either through his chosen people or through his writings, which is the Bible or the church. And not just some random guy in the desert.
Well, but that's how the biblical books are written, are random guys in the desert.
Well, I think that's an oversimplification.
Anyway, we'll get into this at some point when we cover the deuterocanonical books.
It's biblical inspiration.
Yeah, this sounds awesome. I do like this discussion, though.
It is a good one.
But then this leads us to the Zechariah passage, which is one for me that is very interesting because it's a prophecy about Jeshua the high priest. Zechariah sees a prophecy about Jeshua the high priest, and Jeshua is standing before, on one side, the angel of the Lord, and on the other, the Satan. And what I brought this up in the episode, but I thought was so cool is God rebukes his accusation so much so that it's not recorded in the story. That no one will hear it.
What the accusation is?
Yeah.
Right.
Which I just thought is the coolest thing ever. But it's a man that is high priest that is being accused by Satan as sinful, and that he should not be able to be the high priest, or at least exist.
Right.
Or at least exist.
And God is saying, no, I've freed him from his sin.
I've taken off his
cleansed him.
dirty cloak and I put my own on him.
Yeah, I've snatched him from the fire, from judgment. And
sounds a bit Jesus-y.
It does. And so
Monkey sees pattern.
Yes. But it's like with Job, like with the Garden of Eden, Satan is in the presence of God in this story.
Right. If it's describing a real, because I don't disagree with you. I think the Bible does put forward this argument, and it is very interesting that Satan still approaches God. I don't know if that's a spiritual reality or more just a literary device.
Interesting.
But I would argue that the fact that it's used over multiple times in the Bible in multiple different ways, that it argues that Satan can approach God, and God does get Satan to do things. But
I agree.
Okay. Because you looked at me with skepticism for a minute.
I for a second, I thought you were going to argue that it's just like, it's just a literary device. That's not what actually happens. And I'm like, what?
No, I think that the fact that even if it is a literary device that so many people have used it over so many different times shows that they generally believed, and maybe even still believe, that Satan can approach God if it's a spiritual reality.
And if that's recorded in the Bible as what's happening, not just as a figure of speech, like even if, let's say, Job is a story right?
Yeah.
Not reality,
Yeah.
right? And it's made to be as a narrative to communicate an idea. It happens there. But then it also happens in the passage that Josh is talking about. And then it's just odd how
Often it is.
yeah. And so to Colton, to your
agree.
point that it's like, I think they believe that can't, not just as a literary device, but that does happen.
The only reason I bring up that roundabout way is because I will admit I am not familiar at all with Zechariah.
Yeah.
I've read it once, maybe twice. I don't remember, but does that passage, you say it's prophecy? Is it prophecy of Jesus? Is that the idea? Or is it prophecy of something that happens in narratively within the Old Testament?
It's so Jeshua the high priest is the one that becomes the high priest of Israel, and he has parentage from the kingship as well.
Sure.
And so it's also one of the nails in the coffin of that idea of Old Testament prophecy showing that Jesus is both the high priest and king.
Sure.
Well, it's the echo. It's the what's it called? Where the foreshock of the proper unification of the priestly king that we saw in Adam, but then fulfilled and restored truly in Christ. And he's the foreshadow of that.
Yes.
Well, Yeshua, the priest.
Yeah. So what is this prophesying specifically? This passage, what is it prophesying?
Is it prophesying, or is it just talking about?
It's Zechariah is talking about how he was shown this.
Mhm.
So,
but it's talking about, but Yeshua is the priest
at the time.
At that time.
So it is talking about
being
Yeshua, not about something in the future that might happen.
Yes.
Okay.
It is talking about.
Then my argument doesn't make any sense.
Well, no. But is God's prophecy? Is he seeing a window into something that actually happened in heaven, or is God just saying,
Sure.
"Hey, think about this"? He's clean,
Right. I would argue if God showed him it, it might probably be a reality. At the same time, it might not. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was
The
going
effects
to
of
get
the
into
story are real, but
I was going to get into like if it's just showing the future, it's going to be clouded in mystery, much like many of the other prophecies are.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be perfectly literal. Otherwise, we know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But since it's already in that story happened through Jeshua, Joshua. Is it Joshua?
It's one of the variant spellings, and so that's why a lot of the times you'll see it written as Jeshua.
Okay.
So
anyway, my argument doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And then it jumps to we forgot the David passage where there's two stories, Samuel and Chronicles, where it mentions that there is first God entices David to take a census, and then in the Chronicles story, it's the Satan entices David to make the census.
Yeah, that one's confusing.
There's also another passage where the adversary pops out.
Oh yeah.
I just find it funny.
Okay, show.
This was Balaam. But God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord, which eventually you're going to do meditation on, took his stand in the way of his adversary, as his Satan. That's what it says. Satan. That's the word.
Wait a minute.
That's what it says. That's what it means.
It's
Therefore, it must be.
yes.
That's not how that works.
I just wanted to throw that out there.
No,
That's
so
funny.
there's that. There's also one time where I believe it's in somewhere in the prophets where God says he opposes his people.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And it's again saying like with Peter, right? When Jesus calls Peter Satan.
Yeah, but that's in Greek, and it has a different ring
Yeah,
to
it
it.
means something
That
else.
means something a little different.
Yes.
Don't swim out of that one.
No, but the idea being is that it's again, this is the point that we made in the episode, but he's referred to as the Satan. The Catholics give him a name, Lucifer, but he's not given a name.
Mhm.
It's a title.
Right.
It's what he does. And so you see him opposing God's people. He's called the Satan. But sometimes people oppose each other.
Sometimes for righteous ends, like the angel of the Lord guarding the camp of Israel from the east with a flaming sword. Anyway, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yep. So, yeah. And then it goes into the New Testament. And we see in Matthew 4 and Mark 1:13, Jesus is led by the Spirit to be tempted by the devil. And so we get a new character, but then Jesus immediately at the end of his temptation mentions leave Satan. And so he calls him by the Old Testament name.
Adversary.
The adversary. Which the temptation of Jesus brings up a lot of stuff from the Old Testament. Adam being in the desert, like the Saul story with Nachash, the serpent. But then the point that it brings up is that Satan knows the Bible
really well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
think that
another old
makes
saying
sense.
we use is that Satan knows the Bible better than you do.
Yeah.
Right. And it's
Right.
kind of discouraging, to be honest with you, but it also fits with like the, even the demons know
Even
that
the
Christ is Lord and
Yeah.
they tremble, right? Like it's,
Yeah.
Well, think about it. They're able to understand, I think at least, they understand how to articulate the Trinity better than us.
Mhm. because they operate within that reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild.
There's actually a really good line in the Veggie Tales.
Which one?
It's the one about Gideon. And one of the angels is talking with Gideon when they're getting, because in Gideon, they get a band together.
Yep.
Instead of the trumpets and the glass, because it's a retelling of the story. So
Right,
he
right,
has
right.
like
For
a
kids.
marching band. Yeah. It's for,
I've never seen this one. This is
anyways,
great.
but
How do
there's
they
a
do
great,
the scooping up with hands?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
They use their veggie hands.
But what's fun is the angel's talking to Gideon, right? And he's looking at these men faithfully go into battle. And the angel's just like, man, sometimes I'm astounded by you humans because a few of you who have faith in God have faith in him without seeing. And we see him every day.
Right.
And yet a third of us decided to go bad. And he's just like, this astounds me sometimes. So you've never seen him.
What's VeggieTales doing that they just put that in there?
That's pretty good.
But VeggieTales is on another level.
It's true. That's what happens when like, what do they say? Like, there's an angel of war that's like, bless you for having faith but not seeing. Yet we rebel every day. And it's like, what is going on? These are vegetables.
Well, it's what happens when you have bored Bible college students who know how to animate.
Yeah, it's true.
That's actually the product of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Man.
But yeah, you get Jesus. Jesus is tempted by the devil. The devil. So now you get this new term for him, which is the devil means slanderer.
Right.
Again, not a name term. Yeah. And the temptation is just we could talk all day we can do multiple episodes on just the temptation of Christ.
Oh, we're in Lent, so it's on par, but
Yeah.
Throws him into the Exodus, technically, sort of.
Yep. Yep.
So, quick side question. Is the name of Satan Serpent because that's what Adam would have named him?
That looks like a snake. I just named a snake.
but in English though, right?
Serpent specifically, yeah.
Maybe that's why he wanted to destroy Adam.
Snickety
Well,
snack.
there is a connection with Seraph and Serpent.
Yeah, that one I didn't make in the episode, and I might make it in the next
Is there?
episode.
Yeah, there's a weird little etymological link. And
Really? Because
Yeah,
Seraph
so-
means destroyer or burner or razor, right?
So it means fire, all those things. It also means fiery serpent.
right. Oh,
And so
really? I
when
didn't
you
know
have
that.
the two seraphim next to God on the throne in the Isaiah passage, when he's like, woe is me, right? Or when God says, who will I
Sure.
send? And he says, send me. The two seraphim next to him have 6 wings, and it specifies feet and hands, feet and faces. And so what do you call a fiery serpent, right? Or a serpent that has wings and feet?
A very crispy snake.
A dragon. And
I thought he was dragging after he lost his hands and feet.
Yeah, I'm.
and it specifically states that
Louise.
this serpent, this snake in the Garden of Eden, loses his his feet.
Do you think they were
I'm
like
not-
fully articulate
And it
human
mentions
hands?
that in the Ezekiel passage that he walks on the stones of fire. The seraphim then grabs one of the coals and puts it on a stone of fire and puts it on Isaiah's mouth to cleanse his lips.
there's something there.
There's some weird stuff going on.
I'm not gonna.
And there's
tie
2
that.
when there's normally in images of angels 3 or 4 or more.
Right.
But
I think I'm perfectly content in saying that seraphim are the burning ones and not dragons, but that's
cool, though.
interesting. It is interesting.
Well, I would say dragons are the seraphim. I wouldn't say. Hey, here's the thing I came up with.
Okay.
Anyways, you're dragons now. You know what I'm saying? I would say it originates with the fiery serpents, and then we say, "Hey, dragons."
Question,
Instead of-
Josh.
yes,
Oh, I see what you
backwards.
mean.
I don't know.
Is one of the reasons why. I'm sorry, I should not laugh in the middle of that question. Is one of the reasons why
You're
serpents
wrong.
yeah,
are seen as this, the manifestation of like the enemy of humans is because that's the point, is in our evolution that they were one of our primary predators. That's why we can throw so
I'm
well.
gonna stop you right
Hang on.
there.
That's why we can throw so well, and that's tied to human eyesight and seeing
Yeah.
of truth and all that kind of stuff.
I'm sorry,
that I
what?
listened to on Joe Rogan's podcast.
I'm gonna stop you right there. I
Going down
100%
some rabbit
agree.
That question was crafted specifically for you. I want
Yes,
you to know.
You're going to make him agree with it just because I had Joe Rogan with
sure,
it.
whatever. But the we could come up with a naturalistic explanation. I am less concerned with that. Like, I like it. Fun idea.
Well, I love the idea that's like you need to make this whole story about how we don't like snakes, and then someone will be like, "Why are snakes evil?" It's like, "Well, freaking bit me."
Well, think about it.
They're not bit my
good, but it also-
great-great-grandfather,
it
and
also
he didn't like
connects-
it very much.
It also connects to how primates would defend themselves from snakes by throwing stones. Is you have to have true eyesight and the eye of truth and all that kind of stuff.
How
but
crushing the
now,
head
the
of the
problem
snake.
where that fails is
No.
is predators, as they get better and better on the food chain, is their eyesight gets better and their brain they get more intelligent, is connected to being predators. And chimpanzees and then humans and as apes, our intelligence and our eyesight becomes better.
That makes sense.
So yeah.
So why did the dragon disguise himself as a rope? That's the real question.
What?
It's the nope on a rope, dude.
We're in George of the Jungle right out of this question.
Is that George of the Jungle?
I don't know what it is. It's just my opinion on snakes.
Back to the devil.
Yeah.
So the devil also tempts Jesus with all the kingdoms and the power. Sorry, if he just worships him.
Right. The thing he already has, yeah.
Yeah.
Or the thing that he will inherit, but not just as God, as new Adam.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. So he already has them in the way that God is king, right? But also the king of Israel is the representation of God's reign in the physical reality.
Right.
So, well, God has dominion. So Adam was supposed to exercise that dominion on the earth.
Yeah.
He forfeits it, which is, I think, a beautiful point that Josh brings up in his thing.
Yeah.
When he forfeits it, Satan, you could say there's a power vacuum, whatever you want to say. Seemingly, Satan takes over.
Well, it at least is the presentation you see in the rest of the story, and then in Revelation most clearly, is that he is the one that influences the kingdoms against God. And so
He's the prince of the world.
yeah.
But one of the things is with Christ, well, God has dominion, but he by the fall of Adam and Eve has that image of him that's to exercise that dominion over the earth has been thwarted by their sin. In Christ, who is both the God and the new Adam,
Right.
there's a realignment of God's true domain and
And the image of God.
the image of God in humanity,
Yep.
exercising that dominion. And so Jesus, as the new Adam, has right to that domain in both senses.
Right.
Yeah.
He's earned it twice.
And really, there's a usurper who has them because of the failure of the first Adam.
Well, it's the not to make it's Lion King.
Hold on.
No,
Wait.
it is. It's
What?
It's he has the rightful claim to the throne, but currently his evil uncle Scar is running the kingdom. But it's a tormented mess. But Simba's the actual king.
So
Everybody
Mufasa
knows
is
it.
God.
And then they hold him over.
He's the spirit face in the sky that gives him wisdom.
That's
Hold
true,
on.
actually.
That's true. There's a little too much.
That tells him you're my son. Well, no. The Lion King is the story of
right.
Hamlet, and Hamlet's the story of Osiris and Horus.
Oh my
Which
goodness.
is Jesus, right?
Holy moly.
No, I'm just
and then they
kidding.
hold him over the high place at the end of that story.
Yes.
I think. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Okay, we're down a rabbit hole. I don't understand.
It's the myth. It's
You don't understand? You don't understand Lion King, Hamlet,
No, I get-
Osiris.
I've never seen Hamlet. Okay,
Hamlet is Lion King.
it is a play. You're right.
Oh, so the Lion King is based on Hamlet, and Lion King 2 is Romeo and Juliet.
There's a second one?
Yeah.
There's a 2.5,
I mean, I've seen no.
which is based on the Taming of the Shrew. Sorry, the Tempest.
What? I've seen. I know that one.
Okay. Sorry. We've deviated. Forgive me.
So the temptation in the wilderness
Yeah.
by Satan for the kingdoms of the earth, right?
Yeah.
If he bows down to him, what would that look like? Is that supposed to be the same temptation as Adam and Eve would have had?
Well,
at least in like as a replacement.
Well, and what's interesting about both is that Satan is tempting this individual, this Adam, with something they already have.
The one without sin.
Yeah. He's tempting Adam in the beginning with, hey, you can be like God. Well, they are like God.
Right.
They're made in the image of God.
Yeah. They're made in the likeness of God. And then with him, he's the king of he's God. he's made it all.
Mhm.
It's his. And so he's tempting it with something he already has, which is an interesting note between the two. And then also he uses God's word to tempt him. He uses God's commands to tempt Eve. Same MO.
It's interesting because you don't often articulate your own temptation when you don't often articulate how you are being tempted and sift it as where am I incorrectly applying God's word?
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what's cool is like he does tempt Jesus with the same things he tempts Adam and Eve.
Mhm.
Hey, look, this food looks good. Eat it. Right. The
Right.
food in the desert makes food. You can do it.
Eat rocks.
You can be like God, right? You can be like God. You can have this power and this wisdom. Oh, you can rule over the world like God does.
What about
Yeah.
the jump and then God will send an angel to save you?
Recognition in the temple.
Also, you will not
He's on the
surely
temple
die. Yeah.
What's that have to do with Genesis
Genesis?
Yep.
Oh,
specifically?
you asked about Jesus' temptation.
Yeah,
So I gave an answer for that.
Yeah. That part to me makes sense. But
Okay.
then how does that tie it to Genesis? Because he's saying it's
Yeah.
a parallel. Of,
Yeah.
I don't really buy into the whole parallel. Sorry about that.
yeah. I think
it's the you will not surely die. Because, I don't know, it would kill him. If
That's an interesting one.
Yeah, but
I think generally speaking, the fall narrative is tied with
Mhm.
Jesus being tempted in the wilderness on purpose.
Yeah.
That he is tempted in the wilderness and succeeds, whereas Adam failed.
In paradise.
I don't know if I call the wilderness as paradise. But
No. Jesus was in the wilderness and succeeded. Adam was in paradise and
Yes.
failed.
I think
Yes.
it has more ties with Exodus. But you can say like they're compiling on top of one
right.
another.
I think that parallels on purpose. I don't know if you agree, but Exodus, sure, I can agree with that too.
I think they're all building on each other. Because it's
Typology.
like Eden, Sinai, Temple Mount. Right? It's all these places where you essentially go up to heaven. Essentially, that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
But as for the specific temptations, I don't know if it's supposed to be specifically referencing
Yeah, that's the point.
Genesis 3.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
You then get where am I? Oh yeah, you've got the famous passage where Jesus is accused of being the devil or working with him.
Yeah.
Which is interesting considering have they read the rest of the Bible? But
Also, that's the context in which Jesus mentions the sin that will not be forgiven.
yes,
The
Which-
Blasphemy of the Holy Spirit.
which is
But he also
Interesting.
says if Beelzebub is against himself, which Beelzebub is one of those ones that hasn't been really mentioned before. It kind of has, but Beelzebub being the Lord of Flies.
That also has some like weird connections with Canaanite stuff. But
Yes, it
I don't-
does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
So that's there's something in there that I don't know.
Well, what's interesting is that he points out that like, hey, it would be unwise of him to oppose himself, but also presenting this idea that he has a kingdom, that he is his own entity, his own kingdom opposing God, that there's the enemy's kingdom.
And it implies he has organized purposes.
Yes.
It's not just, even if he is depicted as, let's say, the Leviathan, which is like an agent of chaos, doesn't mean it's just all chaotic. There's no, I think Jesus implies that he has organized plans and desires.
Yeah. And then with the parable where it mentions with the seeds being sown, it mentions that the devil takes away the word of God from their hearts and they do not believe.
Is it the word devil or Satan?
Devil.
Okay.
The slanderer. But as we know from the temptation passage, that the devil and Satan are the same thing. But yes, it's the devil passage because the devil becomes the like New Testament term, except in Revelation and with Jesus specifically.
With Peter.
And with Peter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and Jesus mentions Satan has asked to sift you, which is a very interesting.
Yeah, also weirdly terrifying.
Yes. And then he doesn't say, don't worry, I'm going to protect you. Don't worry, all those things. He says, don't worry, I'll pray for you.
Oh, no.
Better praying for you than on you.
To be fair, if God's praying for me, I think I feel pretty good.
Also, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If Jesus defeats Satan, okay, why does Michael kill him?
Because he's the Prince of Israel.
Prince of Egypt?
Yeah, he's the Prince of Egypt.
The movie.
Yeah.
Or is...
Michael is the protector of God's people.
Here's the argument. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Satan's head and plans and authority and all of that is crushed with Christ's victory on the cross and resurrection.
Yeah.
Chris is Victor heavy here, but that's okay.
Yes.
And ultimately, that is the victory. Is there.
Yeah.
Michael is just the agent that delivers the unplugging of the life support.
He's the sword that God uses to pierce the Leviathan.
Yeah. Yep. It's just the final blow is like, no, you're done.
But it is. Yeah.
Continue.
No, go.
I have heard people make the argument. I don't know how realistic this is or more just fanfic, but
You mean Mormonism?
This would fall more into Jehovah's Witness, but yeah.
Get corrected.
Yeah.
Kill him.
That Michael is the inverse of what the foil to Satan, where he is the quote unquote archangel, the light bringer that is the proper way that Lucifer was supposed to be. Whether or not that's true is the point.
I mean, if he's the anointed guardian cherub, he protects the people of God. And if in the garden, like there's some connections you can make.
Yeah, people point to the redemption of heaven to that degree, not in the same way of like redemption of man that's been corrupted and now brought back, but that by Michael stabbing the Leviathan and piercing Satan and killing him permanently, that is the angels overcoming their own failures.
Yeah,
as well.
It's just how do you reconcile that with it's the seed of Eve that will crush the head of the serpent? Sure. Unless you want to say that it's in the cross.
Yeah.
Which I'm cool with because I like Christus Victor.
It definitely is.
Okay,
well, because then,
but they're also sons of God, right? Angels.
Not seeds of not part of the seed of Eve.
And that would lead to
you're right.
Michael fighting
unless Nephilim.
No. Yeah, I was gonna say.
And
I wanted to say it.
This would lead against my idea of that's Genesis as the fall of Satan. As well, then that makes sense that Michael cast him out of heaven. Then that was
right.
It wasn't the slaying of the dragon. It was he was cast out.
Sure.
Which totally makes sense, and I think there's some ambiguity there.
Can you imagine losing your job and getting replaced by a guy named Michael? That's true suffering right there.
You mean the commander of the Lord's armies?
It is cool. And I really don't like the end of Daniel because of Michael, because it confuses me so much.
Well, we'll
be set up as prince type deal.
Oh, yeah. But the Gabriel comes to give him the message. Sorry, I was delayed for 21 days because I was fighting this demon.
Yeah,
Michael
the
had to
Prince of
take
Persia.
over.
Yeah.
Prince of Persia. The
That's what
video
it
game?
says. No, that's what it says.
That's a video game.
Yep. You're right.
Sands
The
of
movie.
Time.
The movie.
Okay, so they're not locked in time. What
Yeah.
if he was just playing the game, Prince of Persia?
Oh my gosh.
But what we also get
21 days. It calls it the Sands of Time.
There was a sequel, but it wasn't great, so now I'm here.
what we also get from the book of John is that Satan is called a murderer from the beginning, a liar, the father of lies, the father of those who oppose God's people, and there is no truth in him. Which is interesting because Jesus says, I'm the truth. And then he says, there's no truth in him.
Well, I think in John, it continues on with the just like the stark divisions: kingdom of light, kingdom of darkness,
Yes.
truth, lies, life, death. Like it's very black and white in John.
Well, and is the idea of him being a murderer from the beginning, right? Well, the beginning is Genesis. Is the murder the death of Adam and Eve?
Sure. And then he eats their dust. He's a steak eater.
Jeez Louise.
Somebody take the mic away from me.
No one's going to get that joke.
Then you get in John, you have what you don't get from the rest of the Gospels because John goes so hard. Is he says Satan enters Judas or Satan possesses Judas.
Yep.
Which is that is terrifying.
At night.
Yes. And Jesus says,
don't
go
like snakes,
quickly.
dude.
Go do it quickly. Then Satan asks to sift Peter, which is that's an image in
pray
the Old
for you, Peter.
Testament
It's okay.
from when God's like at the threshing floor, when they sifting as an act of judgment, separating the sheep and the goats.
And the chaff from the wheat.
Yeah. And then in Acts, Jesus, there is a person that is healed from oppression by the devil, as if disease in this individual.
Oh, it wasn't
was
healed by the devil. It's
No.
the oppression of the devil was healed.
Yes, but this disease was presented as oppression from the devil.
Okay.
And then lastly, there's a couple of mentions in Acts as the sons of the devil, enemies of righteousness, and affirming of the people of the devil. That there's that the people, like in John, there's the people of the light and the people of the darkness. There's the people that their father is Satan and their father is God.
Yeah.
That there's two camps. And then you get,
Then you have all of Revelation and whatever that means.
Which we've been leaning heavily on this whole time.
yes,
for sure.
because that's where you see so many of these things come together. The devil, the Satan,
It is a wonderful capstone.
the
of
dragon,
Bible.
that serpent that led the world astray.
Well, I think it's really interesting how we talk about how the Bible, it talks about Satan, but as we talked about, it doesn't talk about him a whole lot. More is just someone operating in the background, sometimes influencing humanity and being a big player. Like, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
But the Bible doesn't put a massive amount of emphasis on Satan opposing God all the time.
Yeah. Well, it
Doesn't
seems
even
like
name him technically.
Well, it seems like he's primarily opposing God's people,
Right.
which is what he was cursed to do. I
Yep.
will put enmity between you.
Yep. And there's, like
And
you
the-
said, the emphasis that God is over Satan as well and has victory over him and controls him. He chains the Leviathan.
Yeah.
I can't speak anymore. I think it's interesting for people who point out that Satan, like Christians need a Satan and an evil to oppose. The people have to be saved from him and whatever. The ransom theory stuff. But people use it as a derogatory way against Christians.
In the church, in the early church, and I think you see this, you get this out of John, along with baptism, there's an understanding that you were transferred from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. You were once at the whim and the powers you were subject to the powers of the world, Satan and his many powers.
Or you were once an enemy of God, like the enemy of God. Yeah.
And now you've been transferred into the kingdom of light. Blah, 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 blah,
For sure.
blah. And so that's one of the reasons why exorcisms are often performed at baptisms.
Right.
Mhm.
Which I don't think I like, but
I love it.
I mean, it makes them a bit more metal.
I think
Yeah,
it's
there's
because I think it's because a lot of people say how like I said, derogatorily use this against Christians, like, oh, God took you away from the bad guy kind of thing. But Satan isn't like the ultimate, like he is the ultimate evil for sure. But he's not what Joel said earlier, a lot earlier, about this dualistic nature of being taken from the dark God to the good God.
Mm-hmm.
At least how God presents it. It's God has victory over everything, and Satan himself is not even that powerful of a player. Barely. He's a pawn himself. He's not a player.
Yeah. He's a privation. He exists as a privation.
Well,
that's all.
In the same sense, like we talked about, like how is he like us, right? Like with the Genesis narrative, and he's not, like we said, this force. He's not the personification of evil. He is another created being that sinned, and that as a angelic being is far greater in that evil, but he's not the source of evil, and he's not evil itself.
Yeah, he's the origin of evil, but he's not.
Yeah.
He's like, people don't draw from Satan's power to be evil kind of thing.
Yeah.
They just kind of follow in his footsteps.
There's a little bit of that in the comments of your the previous episode.
Comments were popping off.
Also,
I don't understand.
I love it. What's his name? Inaugurated word?
Inaugural word.
Inaugural word.
That's not
If you're listening, what's his name? What's his username?
Inaugural world, I think.
World.
I don't think it's word.
You know who you are. Awesome.
We apparently don't.
Can we just give him like a round of applause for fighting all the Satanists in the group chat?
Oh.
What?
I was just going to say, thanks. You're doing awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that people who say that you need a Satan to be good, you need an ultimate evil to be good, I think the Bible shows that they're wrong.
They misunderstand the relationship between good and evil and the concept of privation and all that.
Yeah. God is, and that's what I hoped the episode was getting at, was that God uses his enemies for his benefit.
Yep.
Is that they're not out of his control. And he uses them because what you see is that his curse is that he will be killed by the descendant of Eve. He'll be killed by Christ.
Defeated by Christ.
Yes.
I think would be the more.
Yes, but the his head being crushed, the death blow.
Yeah. And the slaying of the dragon and all that, and the Leviathan kind of gets this death and ending symbology.
Well, and eventually himself being cast into the lake of fire.
Yep. In Scotland.
Ness actually means fire in Gaelic.
That's why they all have red hair.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I mean,
I don't think we should say that Scotland is hell. That might be a bit too far.
Scotland's pretty cool.
I like Scotland.
So do I. I'm mostly Scottish.
Yeah, me too. Well, partly.
Do we want to end it off with the two parallels, like with characters?
Sure.
Like
which ones?
So,
or if they want to hear that, they can go to the previous episode.
Yeah, you're right.
That's, you know what? Yeah,
this seems right.
If you're interested in hearing Josh's little summary of what he's talking about, which I think is worth it, actually, go listen to that episode. I loved it. I think you'll love it too. Yeah, go give it a listen.
Man, guys, the more I learn about this Satan guy, the less I like him. Hey, unbelievable! Someone's got to do something about this guy.
Yeah.
See, I know what you're referencing, but I can't say it.
Really? None of you are going to set me up for this stupid joke?
What?
I tried so... Anyways, if you want to listen to our weekly uploads, you guys screwed me over with this joke.
No one help him.
Do you want to say it again? And then
No, I don't want to say it again, Josh. If you'd like to hear the rest of this joke, subscribe to my personal podcast. I'm kidding. I don't have one of those.
Joel's jokes.
Joel's jokes. Just the least inspiring name for a podcast. Okay. if you'd like to check out our weekly uploads, check out secondраtesaints.com. If you'd like to, or YouTube, if you'd like to support us financially in the growth of this podcast, check us out at buymeacoffee.com/secondраtesaints or click the link in our website. If you'd like to follow what we're doing, we've got an Instagram, we've got a Twitter. Check that out. Thank you for listening thus far. I hope that we get some cool questions, comments, and concerns about this episode. I'm really excited to see what the response is going to be. And what comes out of this episode. God bless. Have a great week.
Yep. See you next time.
Yeah, see you.
Yep.
Just ended.
Blood alone drives the wheels of history.
Correct.
Was that said by Lenin or Mussolini?
Dwight Schrute, actually.
The worst.